To make number 5, block number 5, we're going to need 4 of the 3.5 inch squares that we cut of the background fabric, and 1 of the 6.5 inch print fabrics that we cut. So we begin by folding this 6.5 inch square wrong sides together, and I'm just matching up that corner. We take one of the background squares, and it is right side together with this corner, and we match that up. You're going to see a little bit of the background square here behind the fold. We take another one of the background squares and we put it right sides together also on the front of this print fabric, and you want to match these up. And what we're going to do is, you can pin this if you'd like, we're going to sew this seam here. We're going to start actually 1/4 inch. So if you'd like to place a mark at the 1/4 inch corner there, we're going to start sewing at the 1/4 inch. We'll take a tacking stitch there to keep that from coming apart. You can either start a little bit further down and come back stitch up to the 1/4 inch line, or you can start here and go forward a couple of stitches, back a couple of stitches, and then you'll stitch all the way down off this seam here. Here is that seam sewn. So you can see I took a tacking stitch and then I sewed that 1/4 inch seam all the way down off the edge. And you can see that's how the back looks, that 1/4 inch seam all the way down. And try and make sure to match this edge here, because this is actually going to be the edge of your block. Once you sew this seam, we're going to do basically the same thing on the other side. So you can kind of pull that out of the way, turn your block over. I'm going to put that right sides together, just like I did before. Match the seam, pin it if you need to. We're going to start sewing at that 1/4 inch here and sew all the way down. Here's our block so far. We've got both seams sewn on the sides. These kind of overlap one another. Our fold is down here, and if we open this up, it's kind of like a pocket. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to open this up. And for the next part, we're going to basically match these seams, and we're going to be sewing this side of the pocket. I have a pin, and what I like to do is put a pin right in that seam at the 1/4 inch. If I went over just a little bit, it's okay. Just put the pin in that 1/4 inch. And don't stick yourself like I do. And then you're going to also put that pin through the 1/4 inch part here of your seam. And you don't have to try and make it go along that seam. You can actually, as long as you've got this pulled fairly tight, you can put that at an angle. It's just to secure it there and make sure that that seam, that 1/4 inch, does not move. Next, you're going to line these up so that we have essentially the reverse of what we had before. we're going to start sewing at this edge, directly at the edge now, and we're going to sew the 1/4 inch seam just down to where we get to the pin. Then we're going to take a tacking stitch. You can back stitch a couple of stitches and then go ahead on to the next step, or you can back stitch a couple of stitches and go forward back up to the pin, however you want to secure that stitch. Again, this is going to be the edge of your block, so kind of make sure that this edge matches the seam, the edges match. Here you can see that I have sewn this 3rd seam, beginning at the edge and going down to this other seam. If you take a look closely, you can see that I didn't quite go to that seam. I think taking another stitch would have made me go past that, and I really didn't want to do that. The main thing to think about here is we just want to make sure that get that very close and tack it, because when we pull this block into shape, we don't want that seam coming apart. And so we will go ahead on the next side. It's still currently kind of floppy around, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take our pin and we're going to put it through both of the seams there at the 1/4 inch mark, and we're going to sew again from the edge down, and that will be our 4th seam. Here you can see I've actually pinned so that when I take this block over, that it's not shifting around. I've got my pin kind of at an angle here, and this pin here is just holding all the pieces together. Once I have all the seams sewn, what I like to do is go ahead and kind of start pulling this from the back side, and you'll see that the front will automatically kind of pull itself into that diamond shape. On the back, if you go ahead and kind of start pushing this center where the seams all come together down, it kind of pinwheels itself, and then you've got each one of these seams going in the same direction. And then I like to take them and kind of gently pull and finger press that, or fingernail press that. And I do that for each one of the seams, just gently pulling and finger pressing, because you can't actually see this seam from the front, and it does kind of have a tendency to gather up a little bit more fabric in here, and your block will shrink if you don't. It won't be the right size if you don't kind of gently pull that apart. And so then you can turn it over to the front. I like to press also from the back. Go ahead and take it to the iron and press it gently on all of these seams, and go ahead and gently press that center seam there. That's the one where we actually did all the tacking, so that's not going to come apart. And you can see here I've got my 1/4 inch seam allowance on each side of the block. Once you have pressed it, what you'll see is that you have a lot of extra fabric in here, and these edges of this piece are bias, so you can actually pull them and stretch them, and this is going to make our bias edge diamond shape. We're going to stitch this down. We want to do this one side at a time, and basically you'll just be pulling this back into a curve. I don't usually put a pin in this. The fabric will pretty much stay in a curve when you take it to the sewing machine, and you'll want to stitch the edge not this edge, but the edge of here where your where it meets, where the edge meets the fabric when you've turned it down. And that way you won't have any of this coming up after you've sewn it down. So you can sew this with either a matching thread, or if you're really confident in your stitching and you want something contrasting, you could do that. You can have a metallic color here if your fabric lends to that. Mine, I could do a purple, I could do a green, I could do all sorts of, I could do a rainbow if I wanted. I think I'm going to try and do something fairly matching on mine, on this particular colorway. And once you get one seam, one side sewn, then go ahead, don't break your thread, just go ahead and do the next side and sew it down all the way around your block. Just go ahead and sew those down and you will eventually have your diamond, and then you can go ahead and end your thread.